Hey guys, what is up? Today I'm going to be going through and working on the daily driver. With all the rain and the moisture we've had recently, it developed a misfire on cylinder 4. It's got 163,000 miles on it, all factory Ford coils. I'm surprised they all lasted this long. I've seen them typically fail a lot earlier than that, although there's some that last longer, so I'm not going to be that guy that says absolutes one way or another. If you have 200,000 mile factory Ford coils, I don't need you to yell at me for that. But we're going to go over some of the quick things that you need here real quick. It's a pretty simple job. Throw some spark plugs in it, put a coil in it, show you what I got and my tools. So I got my spark plugs here. I went with NGKs, just I figured why not, just good old-fashioned V-powers. I got Pertronix coil. It was the cheapest that the parts store had in stock. And I figured, hey, Pertronix, that's a decent name, right? And then I didn't care to think about this. I saw this when I got there and I thought, well, we'll see what the best China has to offer. Of course, I got my fancy ratchet, spark plug gap checking tool, and what I use to actually adjust the gap, which the right way to adjust the gap is not slamming it on something, just FYI. And I got my 5/8 spark plug sockets. They're magnetic inside, built-in wobble. They're nice. From Matco. They're real nice. So this is what we're going to be using today. I also have an 8mm to go on to my fancy snap-on driver, which is still working wonders. Oh, the label's going on that side. Snap-on! This is going to be to get the hose clamps off for the air intake boot. Get that out of the way. And then a 7mm swivel is what I have here. And that's going to be to take our coil bolts all loose. So, pretty simple job. Before we get started, one of the things you always want to do, which I've seen so many guys not do, and just completely avoid. Can't tell you how many times I've seen people grab a spark plug, take it out of the box, jam it right in the motor. Oh, well, okay, here we go. Put it in there. Let's go. No. You got to understand, this particular spark plug may fit 6, 7, 8 different applications. Those applications aren't all going to have the same gap. So I've already checked these, checked them as soon as I got them. And on this car, Ford specs 50, I believe 52 to 56,000 spark plug gap, which has been pretty common on just about every Ford V8 since the old 5.0 Mustangs. So I always set them to 54. So I happened to come in here. You probably can't see the gapper real good. Oh yeah, that shine is really, really nice. Come on, focus. Just focus. Just focus. Can you focus? Whatever, take my word for it. So I've already checked them all. Another thing is, these things change hands so many times in the process of shipping and handling that it's not uncommon for one of these electrodes to get smacked down, flattened out, contact in the center, or even just too small of a gap. And it just happens from people moving around, somebody drops them. A lot of spark plugs don't have a nice little sleeve that goes over the threads. NGK, you know, I guess they care a little bit more. Some you do get a nice little cardboard sleeve, some you get a nice little plastic sleeve, but a lot you don't. So if it gets dropped, you're out of luck. So that's why it's important to check the gap. And you just want to make sure everything's working properly. So, let's see. Like for example, if these fit, say these fit my Crown Victoria, and then they also fit, I don't know, some kind of 91 Volvo turbo motor or something that uses a 29 thousandths gap. This is not going to be right for that because these are already all at 54. So it's just important to make sure you have the gap at least close for what your spec is. And I think consistent is probably more than anything. No, it's not more than anything. It's important, but having the gap correct is the most important thing. I don't know, that's stupid. Anyway, now I'm just talking. Also, I've got myself a nice big tub of anti-seize. And this stuff usually gets all over everything. I always put it on the threads of the spark plug. Should I put the spark plug? Whatever. I'll show you that later as I'm actually doing it. So I'm going to take all these tools. One thing I'm also going to try out today some of this fancy mass airflow sensor cleaner. I have used this in the past on cars that had erratic readings from the mass airflow sensor, inconsistent readings, and I was actually able to see a difference in how it read through a snap-on scan tool. So I don't think there's any problems with mine, but I'm going to take it off, do it anyway. And today we're also going to put on a later model, supposedly police interceptor lower airbox, which has a bigger opening, and we'll show you that once again as we do it. So let's get everything together, and we'll get right over there and get it going. All right, so here we go. We're going to get started pulling off this intake tube, which is where the 8mm comes in handy here. Just zip these things off real quick. That's not a good spot for that. There we go. And you got these breather tubes back here, one for the idle air control, one for the PCV system. Pull them out. Give it a little wiggle. This thing hasn't been off in quite a few miles. Now, it's probably not necessary to take the whole thing off, but I'm going to anyway, just so it's out of the way. Now we have our coil connectors all lined up here, and this is going to be pretty easy to deal with, as you just give them a little squeeze here with your thumb, bloop, right out. Now, last time I was in here, it was to replace this intake manifold, which started leaking. These Fords are notorious for it, and almost all the spark plug wells were full of an oil water looking mixture. So I'm hoping, because I cleaned all that out last time, I'm hoping to not see anything like that again. My valve cover gaskets are seeping, so that could potentially be a little bit of an issue. I'm going to dive right in with the long unit here. I don't even remember what spark plugs I put in here last time when I changed the intake. Pretty sure I did plugs in it. It was about 50,000 miles ago. And apparently I put E3s in it. Which, if you guys aren't familiar with the Diamond Fire E3, they're supposed to be great. I don't know. It doesn't look like I got that much life out of it, to be honest with you. All right, look here, camera. First of all, you're going to start to zoom whether you like it or not. I don't know. That's garbage. Either way, I'm getting rid of these bad boys. I actually saw a YouTube video somewhere on a dyno turbo car. Somebody put the E3 spark plugs in over NGKs, and it actually, with no changes to the tune, it ended up reading like ridiculously rich, like 10-to-1 or something, just from changing the spark plugs, which I thought was odd, and it was an anomaly they couldn't explain. They ended up going back to their NGKs and didn't have any issues. So I got 19 miles per gallon average with these plugs, and I got kind of a heavy foot. Yeah, I like to bark the tires when I shift from first to second. I hope that's not what I think it is. See some color? You see some color there? I don't know if it's showing up, but right around the center there looks to be some, I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but it looks a little green. They all do. Okay, I'm not that concerned. Never mind. It's just a weird E3 spark plug thing then. So as I was saying, I average about 19 miles per gallon on these. And that's mostly I would say it's probably a little more stop and go driving than it is anything else. If I'm doing just highway trips, I can see 21, maybe tickle 22. My wife has gotten 24 with it. I don't know how, because I was asleep during that part of the trip. Now, we got our gapped NGKs. And we'll put them in there. Being as this is magnetic, slide that in, set that there, stir up our magical silver goo that gets all over everything. Ooh. And the trick with this stuff, or there's no trick, it's going to make a mess no matter what you do, but you don't want to use too much of it, because you really don't need to use too much of it. Use a little bit, paint it in the threads there. That's all. That's probably still almost too much, but oh well. And then what I do is put these in by hand. This part is where I really like using a driver, because it's got the clutch settings on it. And a nice thing about these clutch settings is that they are just low. So these are fine thread, and you really don't want to go crazy torquing them. Hold down the coils. So I just seat them, and I give them a little. That's also good, because if there's anything messed up with the threads or anything, this won't just drive it home. This will give you a chance to stop and save it. Unlike a drill or some kind of electric impact gun or something like that. All right, this side's done. All right, here we go back at it. Back to unplugging our coils. Cylinder 4 is back here with the heat. There we go. That connector is a little tricky to get to, but overall not too bad. Now this is our suspect coil, number 4. Well, it's not suspect. There's a misfire back there, and we want to assume that it's because of this. Which, the way it was acting, it wouldn't surprise me, because the hotter underhood temperatures would get, the worse the misfire would get. So that's typically indicative of an electrical issue, simply because as heat rises, as temperature rises, so does the resistance of an electrical component. So, I put these here. Try not to shake the camera too much. All right, this is cylinder 3. Good and clean. Cylinder 2. Good and clean-ish. And cylinder 1, we got to do a little wiggle around the fuel rail and the parts and the things. Pretty clean. Okay, so here we go. Ow. Alright, this creates a little bit of an angle jangle. This spark plug was not quite as tight as I would have liked it to be, but it's been like that for about 50,000 miles, so I'm not concerned. Get it? Did I get it? I got it. I don't see anything really crazy wrong with them, with these things, but I do see a good bit of wear on the center electrode and up underneath the ground electrodes, because there's a bunch of them. So that just tells me it's time. And then the bigger that gap gets, the more energy is required to fire the gap, fire the spark, so it stresses the coils out more. Theoretically, if you stay on top of your maintenance like you should, which usually isn't by the book, book will tell you 100,000 mile intervals for spark plugs. Wrong. Change those bad boys at least every 70. And if you don't get your coils, if your coils don't get wet, you don't get mud in there, you don't get oil leaking onto them, they should theoretically last the life of the vehicle. I say theoretically because it's, you know, everything can fail at some point in time just from wear. There was oil in there, probably from that little bit of an Earl leak at the valve cover. Now I need rags. That goes to be a clean, dry job. I got my Pertronics made in China coil going back on here. So you can see, wait a minute, let's see. You can see, can't see? Yeah, the sun's usually setting around there-ish somewhere. So it's down below the trees now. But I got my trusty hood light here. It's going to give me what we need. And I'm going to show you about cleaning the mass airflow sensor and changing out that lower airbox housing I was showing you. We'll see the differences between the two. So let me get you guys set up here so I'm not waving you all around town. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is disconnect our plug here, push down, pull out. That hasn't been disconnected in forever. This is our air temp sensor back here. Push down, pull out. And you got two clips. Boom. There's your mass air sensor pulled out. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot this out real quick. This is pretty simple. It's really not too involved. It's just a matter of, I'm trying to see if I can get a good angle here so you guys can see it. You really can't. It's too dark down in there, but there's a wire inside that housing. Put that down. Come on, guy, get the shot. There's a wire inside this little housing. It's a hot element wire. That's where you want to shoot it at, because you want to get that as clean as possible. Then we'll back flush it a little even. And we'll let this sit while I'm dealing with the rest of it. One of the things about a mass airflow sensor and needing to keep them clean, it's pretty important because there's actually a temperature sensor in there. So it checks the ambient air temperature, and it uses that to keep the element in there at a certain temperature above the ambient temperature. I want to say it's something like 382 degrees or something ridiculous like that. So as the air flows over it, I can't remember the specifics of the numbers, but as airflow increases or decreases across it, it either cools the wire or lets the wire heat up, depending on if air is increasing, you know, speeding up or slowing down. When it does that, you get a change in voltage in the sensor because it requires more voltage to heat the element up more when you're taking more air in. You let off the throttle, it takes less air in. That element takes less voltage to heat. Now you don't have air blowing across it, so the voltage drops. That's why you get a lower voltage at idle. You get a higher voltage when you're wide open. Pretty simple, that's the basics of it. Not every single mass airflow sensor in the world is going to work precisely the same way, but they're a pretty tried and true common thing. So we're going to take my K&N air filter out here, which I don't use a lot of oil on them because I don't want them to dirty up the mass airflow sensors. And here's the lower I was talking about. Get my 11 millimeter. So there's just 3 11 millimeter nuts that hold the lower half of this airbox down. Nothing crazy. And I don't know that this is going to really do anything for me except maybe have it be more throaty when I goose the throttle. I don't know. But this little thing is the reason why I'm changing it out. See a little cute little snorkel there? Cute little trumpet. Tiny little, maybe 1 3/4 inch inlet. That's nice. Let me show you what we're replacing it with. Oh no. That's the difference. Why would they do that? Okay. You see the difference in openings? I fit my whole hand through here. Now there used to be a snorkel that would come out and it was like maintain the whole size of this. I thought I had it. I don't know where it went, but this came off of a 99. I just went to put this in and I realized, hey, something's different, guy. Look at the attachment points there. Okay, the lid slides into those hooks. Oh, it's the opposite on this one. So I'm gonna have to take a minute and go find my other lid and see if the mass airflow sensor bolts or unbolts on. Bolts or unbolts, that doesn't make any sense. So I may not be able to use this one today. And just leave this thing a giant mess everywhere, I don't care. Okay guys, so we're no dice on the air cleaner box situation. What I found was the difference between the two lowers would require that I use the upper also off the later model to match. The problem with that is the later model, see this is mine 01, you see the mass airflow sensor housing bolts in. Also it has the air charge temperature sensor right next to it. On the 09, the housing for the mass airflow sensor is integral, and it doesn't have the sensor, separate air temperature sensor here. It uses a whole different style and size mass airflow, so it wouldn't work on this car without a tune. So I think I'm just going to put it back together. Maybe. I think I can make some kind of butchery improvement to this. Let's see. Stick around. Okay guys, so I was kind of looking at this airbox situation a little bit, and without getting crazy, the only thing I could really do was knock out the snorkel, which even that hole by itself is a lot bigger than the snorkel. You can see how big it is back there and how small it necks down to. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I mean, by routing it out directly under the hood behind the headlight, you get a little less intake noise. Also, by shrinking it down, you get a little less intake noise. If you ever hear the old police interceptors, you used to be able to hear them coming when they were coming at you, because you'd hear them goose it and hear the motor, whoo, whoo, get that intake noise sucking through. This, not so much. So it took, there's a little lip on there. It's kind of hard to see. There's a little edge, yeah, right by my pinky finger that goes all the way around. So you can see I smacked it with a hammer from the inside and knocked it out. And that'll take care of that. So that's uneventful. I'm not going to bother filming putting that back in because it's, like I said, nothing special. So the only reason I can think that Ford would have changed the attachment process, because the filter fits, it bolts in exactly the same, is to have more part numbers in their inventory, prevent interchangeability maybe. It's the only thing I could figure, which maybe engineers are trying to keep themselves employed. I don't know. You know, George, we've been using the same airbox for 15 years. You're going to be out of a job. Oh, I'll design a new one real quick. And nothing's different except the attachment point there from the top to the bottom. That's it. Even the little clips, the little snap-on clips are in the same places. Ridiculous. All right. So that's going to be it for right now. Okay, so just a quick little amendment to the airbox situation. Again, I couldn't leave well enough alone, so I busted out the Sawzall with a completely dead blade and butchered the inlet a little bit. So it did come out at an angle before, and by cutting it, that gives it a little bit of an oval, a little bit more surface area, if you will. Maybe. I don't know. Makes me think that it does. Because reasons. So, and it cost me nothing. And if it's junk, who cares? It's Crown Victoria. You can get another one of these air boxes anywhere. As long as you get it from the right year, we're finding out. Hey guys, so you guys are going to get a little bonus feature in this video. You're going to get a cold start of the daily driver here. I'm surprised my phone is picking up this much light in the sky. I promise it's actually fairly dark. So I'm going to set you down, and you can probably caution headphone users. You guys probably can't hear it over the exhaust. Speaking of which, I tricked you, didn't I? You guys all thought it was going to be loud. You're going to have to worry about blowing your eardrums out. It's quiet. It's quiet. So, as I was getting ready to say, you probably couldn't hear it over the ever so slight burble of the exhaust. But, tell you what, that Airmotive Stealth 340 pump in the fuel tank is just screaming away. Actually, it's pretty good. It's not nearly as loud as the aftermarket pumps that I've used in other things. And when you're in the car, you can't hear it at all. You got no idea that you got an aftermarket pump even in there. I know somebody's going to go, oh, what'd you put one of those in there for? It was the same price as pretty much everything else, so that's why. All right, that ought to conclude it. I'm going to mash all this up into one video of butchery, and we'll see. The resolution at night is not good. Looks staticky. No bueno. Oh well. Good night.